everything except for the ceremony. And the party.
Okay, good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Denise Merrill, Secretary of the State of Connecticut. And here we are on the eve of another election. And the first thing I want to say is a big thank you to everyone who worked on the 2020 election, especially those local election officials. And it takes thousands of people, literally, to put on an election, even here in small Connecticut. And so, as I have said now many times, 2020 was the most successful election we have had in Connecticut on many, many measures in many years. And it was in spite of the emergency of the pandemic, all the circumstances under which we had to work, and it was extremely difficult, but we pulled it off. There were more registered voters in Connecticut than any time in the history of the state, and there was a higher turnout than we've had in years of that bigger number. So now fast forward, here we are, and it's local election time. In the off years, that's when we have elections for local officials. And we're here today as a group to tell you how important this local election is. And I am very much hoping that every voter who came out in 2020 will be back in 2021. We have made many of the same preparations that we did in 2020, and I have to here say my thanks particularly to Governor Lamont. He and I worked in a partnership to make sure that every eligible voter who was registered was able to use an absentee ballot in these very extraordinary circumstances in 2020. We worked for months to get it right and to make sure that everyone knew that they were able to use an absentee ballot in 2020. And I'm happy to say that due to the work of the legislature and the governor, we are able again in 2021 to use an absentee ballot. That is to say that any voter can use an absentee ballot in 2021. There was a vote of the legislature and they confirmed this just for the situation we're still in. And we are still in a situation of an emergency and COVID and people feeling that they're not able to go in person to the polls without jeopardizing their health. And that's the reason we did everything. This is to make sure that every voter is able to vote in whatever way is possible for them. And access to the ballot, of course, as you all know, has been a hallmark of my administration over the last decade. And I thought 2020 was just a real marker for a time when we made that real for people. So my job here today is simply to reiterate all the rules that people should know before they go out to try to vote. So if you're going to use an absentee ballot, and as I said, every eligible voter, every registered voter can use an absentee ballot this year, I would say it's almost too late to be mailing to get an application, because in Connecticut, you have to apply for an absentee ballot. We don't just send ballots to everyone, contrary to what some people may think. You have to apply, you have to be on the voter registration list, and then you can do it by mail, but it's getting close enough to the election that I would strongly recommend anyone who wants an absentee ballot to go down and get an application at your town hall. In Connecticut, our elections are held in every one of our 169 towns. There are registrars of voters, and that's where you go to the town clerk's office to get your absentee ballot application. You can fill it out right there, and then you can just drop it right either at the town clerk's desk, you can get your ballot right there, or you can drop it in the other new thing we have now in Connecticut, and that's the ballot drop boxes, which became a wonderful way for people to be able to make sure that their ballot got to the town in time. I'll give you a few more deadlines just so people know for sure. You can still register to vote. If you have moved here or you simply haven't registered up till now, the deadline is October 26th, next week. So you can do that online if you have a Connecticut driver's license. You can do it at the DMV if you're changing your address, or you can do it in person at Town Hall, at the clerk or the registrar's office. Plenty of time. And then that deadline is midnight on October 26th. If you want to check where your polling place is, you can go to our website, which pretty much has any information you might want. It's called myvote.ct.gov. You can get the application for the absentee ballot there. You can look up to make sure you're registered, and you can look up your polling place if you're not sure where it is. All polling places will be open as usual. Let me just say one more word about some of the preparations we've made for this election, because I know 2020 was a very special election. We had millions of dollars of federal money, and we used it to help the towns put up all kinds of protections to protect people against COVID. It was extremely successful. We are making similar changes this year and new processes. As I said, the ballot boxes will be open for people to use. We have done a lot with cybersecurity. I know there have been concerns over the last few years about, can our elections be hacked? I would have to say our elections are much more secure than they were when we first heard about hacking in 2016, which is the year that we heard that the Russians had tried to break into our voter registration system. Came as a bit of a shock at the time. Since that time, we have put in place many, many security measures, both at the local and state level. We have continued those partnerships with everything from the National Guard to the Federal Department of Homeland Security. I myself am on a committee at DHS where we hear, highly secure information about anything they may know about any attacks on our elections. So we are much more secure than we were in 2016, and I'm very confident that will continue. I have put my deputy, Scott Bates, in charge of the security measures we're taking, and every registrar in every town has had training on how to make sure that you're keeping our system safe. We are taking measures. I know the towns are taking many measures to make sure that people can vote safely if they do vote in person. So I just want to assure everyone in Connecticut that our system here in Connecticut is safe and secure, and you will be able to vote in whatever way you choose because you, the voter, are in charge of your election. And with that, I think I will now turn to some of the folks behind me, all of whom have been very, very interested and concerned with elections and how we do in Connecticut. I am proud of all the work we've done together, and I'm very glad they're here with me today. So I think I'm turning first to Tom Swan, Executive Director of the Connecticut Citizens Action Group and a longtime advocate and supporter of fair elections.
Thank you very much, Denise, and thank you for your leadership on ensuring that people in Connecticut can vote safely and that we're continuing to expand access to the ballot. As Denise said, 2020 was a great success here in Connecticut. We haven't seen anybody even try to push the big lie here locally because we were so successful and the elections were administered so well. What I'm particularly proud of is how we responded to the push in 2020. And last year, the legislature, with Denise and the governor's encouragement, and particularly with Senator May Flexer's leadership, passed the strongest voter enhancement bill that we've had since the passage of the Citizens Election Fund in 2005. At a time that nationally we have voices trying to restrict people's access to vote, Connecticut said that's not what the Constitution state is about. And our elected leadership stepped up and passed, as I said, the most comprehensive set of reforms that we've seen since we passed public financing. But we're not done. We still have additional chances to improve people's access to vote, whether it's next year's constitutional amendment or the constitutional amendment in 2024. We're going to need to continue to work to pass them. But we're here today to talk about this year's elections and to remind people why it's so important. And I'm going to tell a personal story on this. I live in a town that has a great youth sports program. The boys' Little League has 2 fields. 50 years after Title IX, there is no girls' softball field. It's a ballot question on the Coventry town elections this November. 50 years after Title IX, we should definitely be ensuring that girls have equal access to boys, and my family's going to be out there organizing between now and Election Day to make sure that happens. But in closing, I just really want to thank the leadership here and Senator Flexer for your really great work at showing what a democracy is all about.
Thank you, Tom. And now I'd like to introduce Luke Bronin, who's, as we all know, the mayor of Hartford.
Thank you so much, Denise. So grateful to you and to your entire office, the Secretary of the State, for everything that you've done to make sure that our elections are safe, secure, and convenient during this time when elections could have been so difficult. But as you said, and as Tom said, the 2020 election was one of the smoothest in recent memory. And that's because of your work, your team's work. It's because of the legislature's partnership, and it's because of the governor's focus and priority on making sure that collectively we make elections convenient, safe, responsible, and secure during this unprecedented time. It's really extraordinary when you think about the fact that in 2020, about 650,000 people in Connecticut voted by absentee ballot. When they cast their vote for whichever candidates they preferred. But I think they also cast their vote for no excuse absentee balloting. They cast their vote for a more convenient way to express your voice in elections. Connecticut has taken tremendous leadership during this pandemic, but the truth is, for years, Connecticut has lagged many states when it comes to making elections easy for residents. And I'm thrilled that last year, because of the governor's work and the Secretary of State's work and the legislature's work, that changed. And thrilled that the legislature and the governor again partnered to make that possible this year. But looking beyond this year, I hope that we all can agree to a basic principle, which is that in a strong democracy, it's better for more people to vote. And for more people to vote, we need to make it easier to vote. I also just want to say, as a local elected official, that I hope everybody comes out and votes this November, with as much enthusiasm as you voted last year, because there's an enormous amount at stake in every local election. It matters an awful lot who the President of the United States is, and it matters an awful lot who represents us in Congress and in the legislature. But as Tom said, in so many ways, your daily life is most directly affected by who represents you in the mayor's office or the first selectman's office or the Board of Education or the town council or the planning and zoning board or any number of other local elected positions. So please recognize how much is at stake, recognize how much your voice matters, and get out and vote. And if you don't want to vote in person this year, you can once again check off the coronavirus pandemic as the reason that you want to vote absentee and make your voice heard. Thank you so much again to everybody, and Secretary Merrill, thank you again for the chance to be here and share this message today.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bronin. Now I'd like to introduce Rabbi Ginsburg, another strong advocate for voting rights here in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you, Secretary. I just want to reiterate what the Secretary's been saying, the importance of going out to vote. It's a fundamental right of democracy to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And in the religious community, you know, we take this seriously. We know that's how our voice is heard. So we exhort everybody, go out, register, vote. To the religious leaders, canvass your neighborhoods, make sure everybody knows that they have the right to vote and they should go out to vote. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Governor Lamont for his courageous and really decisive leadership throughout the coronavirus. I think when the history of the coronavirus will be written, Governor Lamont will be regarded as one of its greatest heroes. And on behalf of everybody here in the state, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank him for his leadership. And may God continue to give Governor Lamont and his entire amazing team continued strength to continue to lead this state. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. May Flexer? Now I'd like to invite Senator May Flexer to come make a few remarks. She's bringing her
Future voter.
future voter. She can hang out over there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is May Flexer. I'm the state senator from the 29th District and the co-chair of the Government Administration and Elections Committee, and I'm thrilled to be here this morning. I want to echo the comments of Rabbi Ginsburg. I think you're absolutely right about the governor's leadership and how it will be regarded both right now and in history. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank Secretary of State Denise Merrill. This is the last municipal election she'll be our chief election officer for, and how lucky are we that we can have such confidence in our election system because of her tremendous leadership as Secretary of the State for the last 12, or it will be 12 years. And because of her leadership and Governor Lamont's leadership, some of the reforms that Tom Swan mentioned and that the Connecticut Citizens Action Group advocated for were possible. And I'm thrilled that Connecticut is the opposite of the rest of the country, that we are leading the charge in creating a more inclusive democracy and opening up our election process to make sure as many people can participate as possible. And the fact that we can vote by absentee ballot in this election is due to their leadership, but also because of the steadfast leadership of my colleagues in the state Senate, Senator Martin Looney and Senator Bob Duff. They ensured, when it was controversial, frankly, in the springtime, as to whether or not this expanded use of absentee ballots would be appropriate, when we all were hopeful that perhaps the pandemic was actually waning, we stood strong and we made sure that we didn't know all the facts yet of how the pandemic was going to work. And so I'm really thrilled that voters won't have to make a choice between their health and the safety of their family and whether or not they can exercise their right to vote. So I'm hopeful that we'll see an even larger turnout because it is finally easier in the state of Connecticut to cast a vote in our municipal elections. And it's said every year that municipal elections and the people who lead our towns and our cities are the most important people in terms of how they affect our daily lives. And that's never been truer than right now. Whether or not you can have confidence that your child and their health is safe in school is determined in many ways by your local leadership. Whether or not we feel safe in our communities right now is determined by local leadership. And turnout in these elections has unfortunately been relatively low, especially when you compare them to the numbers that we saw in 2020. So I encourage all voters, look at your ballots, understand who wants to run your town, and make sure that you exercise your right to vote this year. It is easier than ever. You can get an application for an absentee ballot. You can go right down to your town hall, fill it out right there, or take it home and put it in the wonderful drop box that Secretary of State Merrill has ensured is still accessible to voters in every community in our state. It's really important this year that we choose the right people to lead our towns and our cities, and I hope that all voters will be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Flexer. And now, before I introduce the final speaker and my partner in all of this, I want to take everybody back to the spring of 2020. Before vaccines, before anybody knew where we would be today with this pandemic, with COVID-19 and all its variants, the governor and I had to make a decision about what to do about allowing people to vote during the election. I was getting literally hundreds of emails from people, frantic, because they thought they wouldn't be able to vote, because they were scared for their health, particularly seniors, I have to say, who were particularly vulnerable, or anyone who had any kind of underlying condition that meant they were vulnerable to COVID-19. Now, it's hard to remember, we were thinking at that time vaccines wouldn't be available for years, potentially. We had never done absentee balloting to a great degree in Connecticut. Usually in Connecticut, there's about 5% of people who vote by absentee ballot. we had to suddenly decide how we were going to allow this and how it was going to be accomplished. It meant that we had to have hundreds, even thousands of volunteers who did step up to help us out at the local level. They stepped up to be poll workers, even when it endangered them. They stepped up to help out with getting people registered, getting absentee ballots processed. Town clerks had to hire thousands of extra helpers to help them process all of this. We made it happen, and it would not have happened without the governor of Connecticut. Ned Lamont understood immediately when I went to him and I said, what are we going to do? We have to allow people to be able to exercise their right to vote. He understood it immediately. He immediately went into action and crafted an executive order that allowed us to allow people to exercise their right to vote. And for that, I will always be grateful. And we've been partners ever since. So with that, I would like to introduce Governor Ned Lamont. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and right back at you. You've been an incredible leader for making it easier for people to vote and to vote safely for 11 years, and your job is not over. I'm going to talk about the importance of voting, but I'm going to back into it a different way. We had the President of the United States came to our state and graced us with his presence on Friday. And he made a stop right here in Hartford, right across the way at a daycare facility. And we were out there in the playground. Luke and I were both there. He saw the president on one knee, surrounded by some parents and teachers and 35 kids, something these kids will never forget for the rest of their lives. And right across the fence were angry protesters yelling, cursing, dropping the F-bomb, and it was embarrassing. And I contrast that moment with watching some of the eulogies to General Colin Powell. And I heard him say this morning as I was on the Stairmaster that, you know, democracy and American democracy is the last great hope on earth. We have many, many faults, but go out and fix those faults. Don't curse the faults, fix the faults. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what you try and do at the federal level. That when Tom Swan is out there working on a ball field in Coventry, that's what you do. Get involved at your local community level. Get involved in a public service. Get involved in a not-for-profit. Run for office. And for God's sake, vote. I want you to have a stake in this election. And those local elections, those federal elections, I want you to have a stake. And I know these elections can be contentious, and I know they tear people apart. And then the election's over, you get back together, and you get to work. And I would have said the same thing if it was President Donald Trump in that daycare center as well. That's not who we are as Americans. That's not who we are as Connecticut. We are going to vote. And as was pointed out, we're at the top of a lot of lists, Connecticut. Vaccinations and education. We're not at the top of the list when it comes to people voting. And that's another list I'd like to get to the top of. I'd like people to know that their vote makes a difference. I want you to have a stake in the election. I want you to have a stake in the outcome, because that's how we make this a better state and a better country. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. And with that, we conclude our press conference, and we'll take questions.
Do you have any statewide numbers on absentee ballot applications that you can share with us? Do you have any voter registration numbers you can share with us at this moment?
We have heard anecdotally that there are a lot of requests out there in some towns. The ones I've heard from have been sort of the mid-sized cities where there happens to be a strong election going on, places like Stamford, Hamden, Manchester, I've heard from. And there does seem to be a lot of interest in voting absentee ballot. Yep. And
You don't have any numbers?
no, I don't have any statewide numbers. You know, that's the thing about local elections. They're very local. And so...
Does that information get reported to you? So,
the voter registration numbers do get reported. I don't think we have. I see my staff back there. Do we have any numbers on voter registration so far?
okay.
We'll get
Thank
them
you.
to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Where are we on the ranking? What's the latest ranking on how we are on voting turnout? You said we're not number one. Obviously, we're not. Well, what is the latest? Where is Connecticut on this whole
Well,
thing?
we're in the top 10 states. I know that much. Part of the problem has been that we don't have easy access to voting by mail or early days of voting. We're one of only 5 states now that don't have other days besides Tuesday to vote. And that obviously helps turnout because it makes it easier for people to show up. But those states that do have voting by mail, for example, Oregon, Minnesota always has a very high turnout for voting. We're up there because we do have a lot of interest in elections, but those things would certainly help our turnout.
Are Connecticut's laws pertaining to absentee ballot applications even too complicated? Your office gave advice to people in Guilford that I believe turned out to be incorrect, and that became a controversy in Guilford.
Yeah, that was sort of a technical issue in a sense. I think our laws are behind the reality of the fact that more people are requesting them. So our laws are geared for when you're going to send out, let's say a group wants to send out 5 absentee ballots, then you have to sign for them and so forth. If you're sending out 10,000, which is now happening because people are sending out applications to many more people, and many more people are using those applications to apply for an absentee ballot. So I think we should look at it honestly, because it is behind the reality at this point. But that only happened in 2020. We haven't really had a chance to catch up with it.
Governor, you seem to get something off your chest today concerning the conduct of protesters outside the Capitol Child Care Development Center. Why now? I mean, is this something that's just been kind of roiling with you, the way they behave themselves?
Well, it only happened 3 days ago, so it was fresh in my memory. It contrasted with the dignity of Colin Powell, who we didn't always agree with, but was an amazing American patriot. And there's been something of a coarsening of the political culture in this country, and it comes and it goes, and I just thought it was worth stepping up, saying what I thought, and gets back to the importance of voting. I want people to have a stake in the outcome.
Since he's in his limo, et cetera, do you have any understanding that that the president may have heard some of that chanting? And frankly, did you talk to him about it?
I did not talk to him about it, but you could hear it loud and clear from the playground at the daycare center.
Yeah, one more, go ahead.
Governor, on the Unite CT robocalls that you put out, station's wondering how folks should know to believe your voice when they hear it on the phone, given how many robocalls and scam calls people now get.
Boy, that's a tough one. I did the robocall, and hopefully it's a distinct voice and you can recognize it. And if somebody wants to imitate it, at least it was a good message.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I don't know.